What I'm about to tell you is going to go against everything you've ever heard about fitness and nutrition. Most people in the fitness industry will tell you that you either have to pick between losing fat or building muscle, and it is impossible to do both at the same time. You have to pick one, you do it for 12 weeks, and then you switch it up. But the problem is that when guys do this, they stay stuck in this hamster wheel of one step forward and one step back. And because of this, they never get to the point of looking or performing the way that they want. Now, that is completely wrong, and I'm going to show you exactly why and how to accomplish both at the same time in an efficient way. Now, this video is going to be long, and most people in today's age with their dopamine depletion and TikTok brain are probably not going to watch all the way through, and the ones that do are probably not going to implement it, because that's just the reality that we live in. Most men these days are not men of action. But I'm telling you, if you watch this entire video and if you implement the nutrition strategy that I'm telling you about, you are going to take your performance and your physique to the next level, and this is going to be a strategy that you can use for the rest of your life. So if you're serious, stick with me because this is 100% going to be worth your time. Now, if you guys are new to the channel, my name is Randy Hill. I'm the owner of High Risk Fitness. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, and I've been a strength and conditioning coach for the last 16 years. I've worked with professional athletes, special forces operators, and guys who just want to be better protectors for their families and improve their athletic performance. And the nutrition framework that I'm about to walk you through is the exact one that I use for my one-on-one personal coaching clients. I literally use this same strategy for Green Berets, NFL athletes, and everybody in between. And this is built around one of the most battle-tested nutrition frameworks there is. It works 100%. All you have to do is implement the strategies. So let's get to it. Now, before we talk about what to eat, we have to talk about where to start. And the reality for most guys is that's going to be in a fat loss phase. Even if you want to build muscle, you need to get as lean as possible first. And that's something that a lot of guys don't want to hear. But the reality is that most guys have a lot more fat to lose than they think. If you look at somebody who is, say 15% body fat and they want to get to 10% body fat, a lot of the time they have a lot more to lose than they think they do. But it is incredibly important for a couple reasons that we get as lean as possible first. The first one is insulin sensitivity. So insulin is essentially the hormone that causes your body to do different things with the carbohydrates that you eat. Now, the more insulin sensitive you are, the more of the nutrients that you eat will be partitioned towards muscle tissue. And the best way to get insulin sensitive is to get lean. We need your muscles to be as responsive to insulin as we can make them. Because if you start trying to grow at a high body fat percentage, a lot of those nutrients are just going to be sent towards more body fat, and it becomes a compounding problem, and then it becomes harder to lose fat over time. Look, it takes a lot of time to grow muscle tissue no matter what, okay? So if you start at, say, 15% body fat and you gain a little bit of fat during your growth phase and you get up to 20% body fat, now it's going to take a lot longer for you to get back down to a state of being lean, and in that process, you're going to lose a lot of muscle mass. The other reason that it's important to be lean first is for psychological reasons, because if you see yourself as lean and when you work out, you get a pump and you can see that muscle being built, you're much more likely to stick to the plan versus starting from a state where you're fatter, and then when you train and you eat, you just have flab on top of that muscle mass and it's not as motivating. But in the end, regardless of that, it's incredibly important to get lean first for that nutrient partitioning effect. We need the most amount of runway possible so that we can grow for a long period of time. If we start at 10% body fat, we have a lot more time to grow than if we start at 15% body fat and we just get fatter even faster. So again, the goal here is we get as lean as we reasonably can first, which for men, that's going to be somewhere around 10 to 12% body fat. And then we start a slow growth phase that we can maintain throughout the year. So think of getting lean first as an investment in the future of your gains, not as something that we do in kind of a back and forth sort of cycle. We spend a little bit of time getting lean and then we can grow for the rest of the year. So you have to front load a little bit of that work. I'm telling you right now, if you start your bulk at 15 to 20% body fat, you're going to regret it and your gains are going to be diminished. All right, so let's start with how to get lean. That's step one. So what most guys do wrong is they crash diet, they crank up their cardio, they lose a bunch of body fat really quickly, but then everything stalls because they crash their metabolism. People are always talking about calories in and calories out. And yes, that's important, but what you have to realize is the inputs that you put in affect the output. So if you reduce your calories too much and you're doing way too much cardio, your body is naturally going to reduce its output by reducing its thyroid function. And I run into guys all the time who are 250 pounds and they're trying to lose body fat and they're eating enough to sustain like a 120-pound girl. And they lose a bunch of body fat right off the rip, but then eventually they get to the point where they're eating next to nothing and the scale's not moving. And a lot of people will tell them, well, it's because you're cheating on your diet. You don't actually know how many calories you're eating. That's not true. It's that your body is in starvation mode and it's trying to conserve energy. So now you're not eating enough and nothing's happening. The other problem here is now our training sucks, so we can't maintain or build muscle mass. So we're losing performance in the gym. We're atrophying muscle mass. We have constant food hunger, which is causing us to binge, or we have this constant brain fog that's causing us to be hangry and think about food all the time and not be able to cognitively perform, which in my opinion is not acceptable. So the fat loss phase has to be done in a sustainable way that produces results over a period of time. Because if you weigh 250 pounds and you're eating 1,500 calories a day and your fat loss stalls, where do you go from there? You can't reduce your calories anymore because you'll freaking die. So we have to start at a higher amount of calories and reduce them over time. And I'm going to explain to you guys the exact strategy that I use with my clients and myself to do that. So you have to think of your metabolism like a fire, because it really is. It changes all the time, all right? We have to give that fire enough fuel, as in food, and enough oxygen, as in activity, to keep it burning. So if we starve the fire, it smolders, it goes out, right? But if we keep enough food in the fire, if we keep enough activity in the fire, that fire is burning constantly. And I have clients all the time who are eating 1,500 calories a day, not losing anything, and we bump them up to 2,500 and suddenly they're losing body fat again. So I'm going to talk about specific strategies for building your diet out later in this video, but right now what you need to understand is kind of the general overall philosophy of how we're going to approach this fat loss phase so you don't screw it up. So as you probably know, there are 3 macronutrients. You have proteins, carbs, and fats. Now, we have to set our proteins because that's like the building blocks, right? We need a certain amount of protein every single day. We also need a certain amount of fat to absorb fat-soluble vitamins and to synthesize hormones. So the carbohydrates become the macronutrient that we use to adjust what happens with the body weight. So what we do is we start at basically calculating a maintenance amount. How many proteins, carbs, and fats and total calories do we need to maintain where we're at right now? Then we're going to reduce those carbohydrates by just a little bit, typically 70 grams, to initiate that fat loss. Now, what this allows us to do is to continue to perform in the gym so that we can progressively overload and therefore build muscle mass, or at very minimum, maintain it, because we have those proteins, we have those fats in place, but we've reduced the carbohydrates just enough to initiate that fat loss happening. Now, depending on how much fat you have to lose, you could be losing 1 to 2 pounds of body fat per week, maybe even 3 if you're super overweight for a good period of time. And then obviously the leaner you get, the slower that's going to happen. But again, this has to happen sustainably so that we can progress that fat loss over time instead of losing 10 pounds right off the bat and then being completely stuck. Now, here's the other thing to consider. Typically, we'll go to a fat loss phase for 12 to 16 weeks, and then we'll have to take a little diet break to get that metabolism churning again. Because even if we just reduce those carbohydrates a little bit over a period of time, eventually your body is going to adapt and we're going to have to take a break. But the cool thing about the break is that we just go back to a maintenance amount of calories, and then we can kind of focus on improving performance in the gym for 4 to 8 weeks, and then we can go back into our deficit with an even higher calorie amount. So this way, we're not losing muscle mass, we're not reducing our performance in training, we're actually getting stronger, and we're ramping that metabolism up so that fire is burning even hotter, and we can eat more food and still burn fat and not be freaking hungry all the time. Now, one more thing on this that some of you guys might not like. I am not a fan at all of carnivore diets, keto diets, or fasting. And here's the reason why. The reality is that when you train, you need carbohydrates to perform. And if we cannot perform in the gym, we are going to lose muscle mass. The other reason is because when you don't eat enough carbohydrates, your body is going to maintain its blood sugar through a process called gluconeogenesis. Now, gluconeogenesis at a very high unscientific level is essentially the process to which your body uses proteins and it cleaves them in the liver to produce blood sugar. Because your body is going to produce blood sugar no matter what. If it doesn't, you would die. So the problem with these keto and carnivore diets is that now the protein that we're eating is basically being used to produce blood sugar anyways. So instead of doing that, what we should do is have the amount of protein and fats that we need and then reduce those carbohydrates over time, but still giving us enough that we're not using that protein to make the blood sugar. We're using the carbohydrates to make the blood sugar. What we're trying to do is stop the body from eating its own muscle mass to survive. Because we don't just want to lose pounds on the scale, we want to lose body fat specifically. Guys ask me all the time, how much strength should I expect to lose when I'm trying to lose fat and cut? And I always tell them none. It's just that the strength progress is maybe a little bit slower. Now, a quick note before we keep going. If you want to take the guesswork out of this and you want a nutrition and supplement system built specifically for you, I can build one out for you. I'll give you specific calorie amounts, specific macros, specific meals, and supplements tailored exactly for you to take all the guesswork out of this. If you want me to build that out for you, there's a link in the description where you can sign up for it, and I will send you a questionnaire. You can tell me everything about your schedule, your preferences, your goals, and I'll build out that diet specifically for you, and then we'll get on a call and I'll explain to you exactly how to execute it. So the link's in the description, but let's keep going. Now, real quick, before we talk about how to build that diet out, let's talk about supplementation, because I know that everybody wants to know about fat loss and muscle building supplements. So we talked about the importance of maintaining thyroid function and your metabolism when you're losing body fat. What happens is when you're trying to lose fat and you're eating a reduced amount of calories, your body is going to downregulate its production of thyroid hormones, which is going to slow your metabolism as a sort of survival mechanism. Because what you have to realize is your body doesn't really want to be super lean. All right, it's going to fight you every step of the way. So what it's going to do is it's going to reduce the amount of calories basically that you're putting out. And the way that we can avoid that is by supporting that thyroid function. So there are 2 micronutrients that I use to keep that metabolic fire burning to support that thyroid. The first one is going to be selenium. Now, I like to dose selenium at 200 micrograms per day. The second one is iodine. Iodine is also going to support thyroid function, and I do 300 micrograms per day in the form of iodine from kelp. These are both super simple. You can get these supplements extremely cheap on Amazon, and you just take 1 pill a day. So we keep those micronutrients topped up, we continue to pump out thyroid hormone, and it's going to make that fat loss phase so much faster and so much easier. Now, the other thing that we touched on was insulin sensitivity. Insulin sensitivity being what your body decides to do with those carbohydrates when you eat them. We want to be as insulin sensitive as possible, and obviously getting leaner is a huge part of that. But there are also supplements that we can use to speed that process of getting insulin sensitive up. Now, my number 1 supplement for insulin sensitivity is going to be berberine. You're going to dose that typically at 1,500 milligrams a day, and we're going to split that into 2 doses. Now, typically you're going to have to kind of crank the dose of berberine up over time. Start with a little bit of a lower dose, because if you start right at 1,500 milligrams, you can run into some digestive problems. The second one is going to be chromium. We're going to use that at 200 micrograms per day. The next one is going to be cinnamon bark powder, which I typically like to dose between 1 and 1,500 milligrams a day. And the next one is RALA, that's alpha lipoic acid, which I recommend we use at 500 milligrams per day, typically right before we train. Now, these compounds all work through different mechanisms to improve insulin sensitivity and therefore carbohydrate nutrient uptake into the muscle cells away from fat. And the beautiful thing is that all these supplements are super cheap. Now, remember, these are not magic pills. These are just things that we use to support the process. Obviously, there are other things that people like to use, like GLPs, which are great. If you want to use peptides and things like that, that's fine, but that is out of the scope of this video. And even if you do use those, I would still highly recommend that you use these supplements to support this fat loss phase. And if you combine all of these, I promise you, these will make a very meaningful difference. So now that we've gone over kind of like the philosophy of the fat loss phase, let's talk about exactly how to implement it, okay? So you build your diet out, which I'll talk about in the next section here. You have your proteins, your carbs, and your fats. What you're going to do is you need to monitor your body weight every single day, first thing in the morning before you eat or drink anything. And you need to write that down in a spreadsheet or a notepad file on your phone, or find some way to track it every single day. Now, we reduce those carbohydrates from our maintenance amount by about 70 to 100 grams, right? And we're monitoring our body weight every single day. So what we're looking for is, if we have not lost 1 pound over the course of the last 7 days, we're going to then reduce those carbohydrates by another 70 to 100 grams. But again, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and reduce it by 400 or 500 grams to try to make it faster, because then you're going to run into a roadblock no matter what you're supplementing with. Even GLPs, I see it all the time. When you're doing this, you're also still focused on progressive overload in the gym. We are monitoring our training logs separately from the diet and making sure that we are still progressing in our training. And if we're not, we're simply not eating enough food, or our training protocol sucks, which is another thing that I can help you fix. So every single week, you're tracking your body weight every day. if your fat loss stalled for 1 week and you haven't lost at least 1 pound, you're going to reduce by 70 to 100 grams of carbs. You simply repeat this process for as long as you need until you get to the point where you are as lean as you could possibly be, or as lean as you want, before starting that growth phase. But remember, the entire time we have not sacrificed the improvements in the training log. That is very important, because we need to at least maintain our muscle mass. If we don't, our metabolic rate slows and then we end up skinny and flabby and skinny fat. Not a situation we want to be in. So again, I'm going to emphasize to you, continue to track your progress in the gym. Okay, so now we are as lean as we could possibly be and as strong as we could possibly be. And now we have this amazing strength to body weight ratio. We're insulin sensitive, and you can even confirm this on blood work, which is, I guess, a topic for another video. But something else that's important for you to do is to get labs done, which you can get through my partner at AlgoRx, which is also in the description. And we can actually see on paper our thyroid function, our insulin sensitivity, our hormones like testosterone and estrogen, and all of that to make sure that we're actually achieving the goal. So now we're lean. We've seen the improvements in our blood work, right? Our A1C, which is our blood sugar over time, has gone down. Our fasting insulin has gone down. These are all symptoms of an improved metabolic system. And we also need to make sure that we're monitoring our thyroid to make sure that we haven't crashed that into the dirt. And if we have, that we can see through blood work by testing our TSH, T3, and T4, or our fat loss has just stalled and we can't figure out why, our thyroid's probably in the dirt and it's probably time to take a diet break for 4 to 8 weeks. But again, if you want to do this the right way, you really should get your labs done. The problem is that if you go to your doctor, you go to your general practitioner, I guarantee you they are not going to test the labs that need to be tested to really keep this stuff on track. They're going to do a basic CBC and CMP and the same thing they do with everybody else, and it's not going to give you the insights that you need. So if you want some help with your blood work, with your nutrition, follow the link in the description, sign up for a nutrition plan with me. I'll tell you exactly what to eat. I'll tell you exactly what labs to get so that we can do this thing the right way. And also, if we order our labs through AlgoRx, it's going to be a whole lot cheaper than just going at it on your own. All right, so next part, now that we've gotten as lean as we need to be, right? Not just a little bit of body fat loss, but significantly leaner, like that 10 to 12% range, which again, hey, it may seem crazy for a lot of you guys to get down to that level of leanness, but I'm telling you, it's a lot easier than you think if you follow this plan. Now we can transition into that growth phase. And the beautiful thing about the growth phase is we're going to conduct it slow but efficiently so that we can stay lean all year while we're growing and not end up in this 3-month bulk, 3-month cut hamster wheel, but we're lean and we maintain that leanness and we can grow for the entire year. Of course, as we're executing that growth phase, we're going to gain a little bit of body fat, but because we're relatively lean, we can just go through a short little cleanup phase every 12 weeks or so for just a couple weeks at a time, shed some of that body fat off and get right back to growing. Now, here's what most guys get wrong about the growth phase. They think, well, it's time to grow. It's time to bulk up. I'm going to do a dirty bulk. I'm going to gain, a pound a week. And what ends up happening is they just get fat and they end up exactly where they were. What you have to realize is that building muscle is a slow process. You can only build a couple grams of muscle a day. All right. It takes a lot of time. And what a lot of guys will do is they'll eat a ton of calories. They'll see a bunch of, scale increases. Their training performance will improve. They'll look like they're getting bigger because they're getting a bigger pump in the gym, but they're actually gaining a lot of body fat and they're going to stall out way sooner than they should. So if we go into this growth phase thinking we're going to eat an extra 1,000 calories a day over our maintenance, and we can only build, let's say, 100 calories worth of muscle a day, just giving you that number, where's that other 900 calories going? It's going to making you fat. What you got to realize is you don't actually need as much food as you think to gain muscle, okay? Food itself is not a growth stimulus. Progressive overload in training is the growth stimulus. The food just supports that. And we really don't need a whole lot of extra food to rebuild that muscle mass from training and have super compensation happen to build muscle. We just need a little bit over maintenance. Okay, so it's very simple. In the growth phase, we keep the proteins the same. We keep the fats the same as we did in the fat loss phase. We're just now titrating those carbohydrates up over time. Again, we go in 70 to 100 gram increments, but The main thing that we're measuring now is not body weight, because that body weight increase is going to happen a lot slower than the fat loss happened. So what we're going to be measuring is training performance, because I'm telling you this right now. If you add weight to the bar in your training, you are building muscle mass. Yes, a lot of your strength gain is going to come from neurological adaptations, but in general, if we see those training logs improving every week, we're probably building muscle. Now, how do we decide when to increase the calories? Because we're just titrating them up, just like we titrated down for the fat loss phase. Well, I'll tell you this, we're looking at the training logs, right? So if your training has stalled and it's not because of shitty programming, then we're going to add a little bit of food. Again, 70 to 100 gram increments. And then we're going to see the scale probably start going up again. And we're also going to be seeing that training performance reignited. Now, because this process happens a lot slower, we're going to need to make those diet adjustments a lot less frequently than we did in the fat loss phase. Typically, it's going to be maybe once a month. But again, we're building that metabolism up. So we're going to get you to the point where now you're eating way more calories than you were before when you were fat, but you're lean, and all those carbs are going to muscle mass and going to training performance. So now we're just up, up, and up. Constant forward progress. One other caveat here. You need to remember that it's important to stay lean during the growth phase. And one other big mistake that guys make is they'll stop doing their cardio, they stop doing their conditioning during the growth phase. One, my training philosophy is to be a human weapon. So somebody that can lift like someone twice their size and move like someone half their size. So as I'm growing muscle mass, I'm not sacrificing my speed. I'm not sacrificing my endurance. In fact, I might even be doing more conditioning because now I can handle more so that I can get even faster and build even more endurance while I'm building muscle mass. Obviously, you don't want to overdo the cardio, but throwing it out the window and severely reducing it is a huge mistake. Keeping your cardio up is going to keep you insulin sensitive, and it's going to keep you lean during this entire process. Now, I'd also recommend, if you're tolerating those supplements well, that you continue using them during this growth phase. You might need less of the thyroid support, but the insulin sensitizing stuff like berberine, ALA, and the cinnamon are still going to be very, very useful. So yes, calories in, calories out is king. However, I will tell you this, eating 4,000 calories and having an activity level that supports 4,000 calories is going to lead to a better physique than eating 3,000 calories and having your activity around 3,000 calories. There's just something about it where the nutrient partitioning is improved, and eating more and moving more leads to a better physique. But again, this is a topic for another day. So now let's talk about what to eat, the actual foods, because it's so much more than just macronutrients, okay? When you eat food, there is a lot of different stuff that happens in your body before that output happens, okay? Yes, calories in, calories out. However, those calories in and what they're comprised of is going to affect that calories out portion, and it's also going to affect what happens with those nutrients when they're in your body, whether they get burned off or they go to muscle mass or they go to fat. A lot of that depends on the types of foods that you eat. Now, I'm a huge fan of Stan Efferding's vertical diet framework. And basically, the vertical diet is centered around foods that are highly nutrient dense. It covers all your micronutrients, highly easily digestible foods, and nutrient availability. These foods are also easy to digest because your digestion and your gut health are also incredibly important, because that is also going to play a role in your metabolism and what happens with the foods that you eat. So our main protein source in the vertical diet is going to be lean red meat. Okay, so it's a complete protein source. You get all your B vitamins, you get potassium, magnesium, all the things that your body needs to assimilate those proteins. So in my opinion, lean red meat is king. However, any kind of lean meat will do. We're also eating a lot of eggs for biotin and fat-soluble vitamins. And our main carbohydrate source is going to be white rice. We're not going to eat brown rice because the husk contains anti-nutrients. It's difficult to digest. A lot of people argue, well, white rice doesn't have a lot of micronutrients in it. It's just pure energy. Yes, it is pure energy, but that's the purpose of the white rice. We're getting our micronutrients from other things. The purpose of the rice and the carbohydrates is to fuel the training and basically fulfill that carbohydrate requirement. White rice is also very, very easily digestible, and contrary to popular belief, typically does not cause massive glucose spikes. We're also eating fruit, right, for fructose and micronutrients and to replenish liver glycogen. And we're also eating Greek yogurt because that's going to have a lot of probiotics, which is going to support the gut health and digestion. also has your calcium. So in the end, the key principle to the types of foods that we're going to be eating are foods that agree with our body. All right. So they don't cause a lot of gastric upset. They don't cause, digestion, bloating problems, gas problems, because if it's a food that our body does not like to eat, it's not going to digest it well, and then we're not going to get the outcome that we want. So now let's talk about how to actually set that diet up now that we know what foods that we're supposed to eat. All right. So we have to calculate what's called our TDEE, which is our total daily energy expenditure. This is basically the amount of food that we need to eat to maintain our body weight right now. Now, what you can do is you can go on Google, you can just type in TDEE calculator. It's going to ask you your age, height, weight, activity level, and it's going to give you like a ballpark of how much food you're going to have to eat every single day to maintain where you're at right now. However, it's just theoretical, right? Which is why we're monitoring what's actually happening with the training, with the mirror, and with the scale, okay? Because yes, like if it tells us this is how much we're supposed to eat, that's not necessarily what's going to happen in practice, because it's just guessing. Everybody's body is a little bit different. And also, I'm not a big fan of using things like a Garmin watch or anything that's going to like track your calorie burn. These are typically very, very inaccurate. And also, it doesn't really matter what it says on the watch. What matters is what's actually happening with our body. But typically, these things are going to massively overestimate the amount of calories that we're burning, and it's going to totally throw us off. So now that we have our TDEE, right, we know how many calories we need to eat. Now we need to figure out how many proteins, carbs, and fats we need, right? Because the macronutrients are important. Okay, so we need typically about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. We don't need to overdo this, all right? Your body can only build so much muscle mass. We just need those building blocks in place to make that muscle recovery happen. We don't have to overdo the protein, okay? The fats, we just need enough fats to synthesize hormones and to absorb fat-soluble vitamins. A lot of people will say, well, you need to eat a lot of saturated fat because that's what builds testosterone. Yeah, that's true, but it's rate limited, okay? It's not like an unlimited amount of fat just produces more testosterone. You just need enough. Carbohydrates are the main source of fuel, and they're the thing that we're going to use to make the body weight go up or the body weight go down. Not proteins, not fats. In fact, the proteins and fats are pretty much going to stay the same whether you're trying to grow or whether you're trying to lose fat. So again, the carbs are what is important here. So what we need to do now, and this is the most time-consuming part, is build our diet out on a spreadsheet, okay? It's very important that we actually build a diet out and not just go based on macros, again, because the actual types of foods that we eat are going to be really important. And also, if you just go based on macros and you're eating different stuff all the time, you're going to actually have a lot of variance in the amount of food that you're taking in every day. Okay, so it's very important that we're eating the same foods pretty much every single day of the week. The only caveat to this, I would say, is I recommend that you plan a cheat meal once a week. The reason you should plan a cheat meal and not try to just go balls to the wall is because at some point you are going to cheat on the diet. And if it's not planned and it feels like a failure and you feel like you lost in your head, one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to spiral and you're going to keep binging and you're going to feel like you're totally off track, or two, you're going to fast the next day, you're going to double your cardio, and then you're going to dig yourself into an even deeper hole. We're going to massively increase leptin, which is going to signal more hunger, and then we're going to just end up in this nasty binge and purge cycle. But if that cheat meal is planned, it's once a week, we're just not going to think about macronutrients, then it's not going to feel like a failure, and it's very easy to get right back on track the next day. Now, the cheat meal doesn't mean that we go and binge and eat as many calories as we can, okay? The cheat meal just means we take the family out to dinner and we just don't think about macros. Maybe we have a dessert, but we don't really overdo it. It just gives our brain a little bit of break from the monotony of the diet. So you're going to build that diet plan out with the right foods and the right amounts at the right times, okay? Now, timing is a little bit of a consideration too. You want to stack most of your carbohydrates around that training time because that's when they're going to be utilized the most. All right. So most of the carbs are going to go pre, intra, and or post workout. On non-training days, I would recommend that you reduce your carbohydrates by 20 to 30% because we don't really need them on days that we're not training. This is going to help us stay leaner and insulin sensitive for longer. But it's very important that we know exactly what foods we're eating in the exact amounts every single day, because otherwise we don't know what's causing the output to happen if we're eating random crap all the time. The other thing is you got to keep yourself honest here with the amounts, okay? Buy a food scale. They're super cheap. Make sure you're weighing and measuring your food. You need to be using measuring cups. You need to be using a scale, because if you don't, you are going to wildly over or underestimate the amount of food that you're eating, and it's going to completely screw you up. Okay, so now we have our diet build out. Now let's talk about meal prep strategies, okay? Because the diet plan is great, but if we aren't able to stick to it, obviously it means nothing. And this is obviously where most people screw it up. They'll spend their time building out a diet plan, and then something will happen and it will become inconvenient. And before you know it, they're not following it anymore. So meal prep is completely non-negotiable, all right? Look, a workout is different because if you miss a workout, you can do it later in the day, you can do it tomorrow, but you always have to eat. So if you don't get that meal prep done when you need to get it done, you're gonna go and eat the wrong thing. Now, most of the clients that I work with are cops, they're guys with, busy jobs, with families. So the meal prep has to be done in a very efficient way. We have to pick foods that are going to be easy to prep and easy to take with us and easy to eat on the go. So when you're building that diet out, you want to make sure that just a couple of those meals are meat and rice. All right. A couple of the other meals can be things like hard-boiled eggs. They can be yogurt with honey, things that are easily transportable. You can even do shakes in a blender. That's totally fine. But again, it needs to be realistic. Most people don't have the time to eat 5 or 6 meat and rice meals a day. So how do we execute it? All right, very, very simple. I recommend that you cook your meat portion, your protein portions in bulk. All right, so you're going to cook, maybe 4 days of meat at a time or whatever it is, in however fashion you want to do it, right? And then you're going to put them in individual glass containers in the right amounts after measuring them out. So now you have all your protein portions portioned out in the fridge, ready to go. For the carbohydrate portions, what we want to do is we want to make those fresh, preferably every day. All right, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not, because if your main carbohydrate source is rice, what you can do is you can buy a rice cooker with a timer, set it up the night before so that the rice is cooked and ready to go in the morning. And then all you have to do is scoop it into the Tupperwares, put it in your cooler, and take it with you. There are a bunch of hacks for meal prep that makes it super easy, okay? One of the things that I like to do for eggs, for instance, is they sell these egg steamers on Amazon for like $20. You put the eggs in a little tray, you pour a little bit of water in there and press a button, and you have perfectly hard-boiled eggs that are super easy to peel in like 10 minutes. And you can prep a ton of those for the week, all right? So make sure that your meal plan hits the macronutrients that you want, but it's also sustainable and it's stuff that you're actually going to eat. You also want to make sure that the food is tasty enough, all right? And everybody's got a little bit of a different opinion on what that means, but look, you need to be seasoning your food, all right? Don't just put plain ground beef and plain white rice in a meal, because after a week, you're not going to stick to that. So season the food however you want, but don't massively change the calorie content, right? As long as you're not adding a cup of mayonnaise or something to your rice, it's probably fine to add a little bit of sauce and things like that. A little bit of barbecue sauce, whatever. It's a negligible amount of calories. Just don't overdo it. But the meals have to be sustainable, okay? So you could have a cup of Greek yogurt and some honey. You could have some hard-boiled eggs and some toast, some things that are easy to eat on the go, but make sure they fall within that vertical diet framework, right? We have to pick foods that are going to agree with our body. So that's basically the full picture, you guys, okay? We get lean first in a sustainable way. That's going to set us up for everything that happens in the future, right? We titrate those carbohydrates down a little bit at a time until we're as lean as we want to be by tracking our training performance and tracking our body weight every single day. We keep that metabolic fire burning by eating the right amounts of foods and also using the right supplements that keep our thyroid up to par. Once we're as lean as we want to be, then we transition into that growth phase where we can grow slowly over the course of the year. Again, we bring those carbohydrates up when our training performance stalls. We prep our food in advance so that we have no excuse not to eat the right foods and we don't fail and go and eat fast food. So in the end, this stuff is really simple. It's not super complicated, but it does require some amount of precision and it does require monitoring to do it right. Now with my one-on-one coaching clients, I monitor their training performance, their diet, their supplementation, all at the same time, so they don't have to do any of the guesswork, and I just tell them exactly what to do every single week based on each week's result. I'm constantly optimizing our training and nutrition to keep us on track throughout the entire year. So if that's something that you're interested in, there is a link in the description, again, to one-on-one coaching, where I can build out an entire training and nutrition system for you and guide you through it every single week. And if accountability and staying on track is one of your problems, I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire, make you fill out your training logs, make you fill out your check-ins, and check in with you every single week to make sure that we're on track. We're going to dial your training, your nutrition, and your supplements in to make sure that we're doing things as efficiently as possible. So again, if that's something that you want, the link's in the description. If you want to do it yourself, that's fine too. Just make sure that you're tracking everything. The worst thing that you can do is set up a nutrition plan and not adjust things as time goes on. So in the end, you can 100% build muscle and lose fat at the same time, all right? You have to dial your nutrition in, you have to progressively overload in the gym, but if you do those things, I see it happen constantly with my clients. Get the foundation right, everything else follows. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.